Hello and welcome to this live stream. As always, let me know where you're coming from, and if you're part of the replay crew, let me know as well. We're going to be talking about modal mixture today, which can seem like an advanced concept in songwriting and music theory when really it's not that complex, especially once you can see it. If you're just trying to see it within your mind's eye, then yeah, it's complex. If you can actually see it, as we will here, it's pretty straightforward, actually, or at least manageable. So the idea of modal mixture is kind of foreign in some ways to a lot of songwriting these days. Modal mixture was more of a thing back in the day, meaning a few decades ago, several decades ago. It's still a thing, like, jazz composers and more advanced songwriters incorporate it, which makes their songwriting more interesting and nuanced. But it kind of went out of style as I think people's songwriters' understanding was kind of lowered to meet the masses. Hey, Dwight, it's cool to see you on. I'm glad you're here. So just to kind of put this in context, we're going to get into modal mixture, and we're going to be looking at it using the circle of fifths to help guide us in the process. And we'll explain how it works here. But to put modal mixture in context, if there is, let's be honest here and say that most songs these days, or many songs these days, pop songs especially, I'm talking, are almost like stupid simple. And I don't mean to say that in a disparaging way. It's just really, really basic. In fact, I saw an interesting interview with Paul Simon on the Dick Cavett show decades ago. And Dick Cavett, who always had interesting interviews, asked Paul Simon, he was asking him about the songwriting process. And he was like, what does it involve? And Paul Simon was explaining this was like in the early 70s. He was explaining some songs and what went into the chord progression and his influence by some classical composers and just kind of noodling around on the guitar. And Dick Cavett was kind of like, wow, that's brilliant. And something to that effect. That wasn't really kind of what Dick Cavett would say. He was more reserved than that. But the gist was, wow, that's really impressive. And Paul Simon was like, yeah, but it's not. He was like, most songwriters today, and he was even talking in the 70s, he's like, it's really not that complicated. In fact, and I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, most of the songs on the radio are like shit, is what he was saying. And I don't think he was excluding himself from that on some of the pop hits that he's had, just saying it's really not that hard. Paul Simon is a great example of someone who incorporates modal mixture. Actually, in Kodachrome, we looked at that song earlier on, and that gets into some cool chord movement. And this song that we're going to look at here gets into some crazy modal mixture, and we'll look at exactly what that means. You're basically mixing modes or incorporating songs from different neighboring modes to expand your palette as a songwriter, to have more harmonic nuance, more harmonic varieties. You're moving through harmonic space. Now, you can come up with some amazing stuff with just 4 chords. And that's been the trend for the last handful of decades as pop songs have gotten really simple. And, I've actually been on a little bit of a U2 kick the last few days because, Bono is truly amazing in how he can come up with amazing melodies over some pretty simple chord progressions. And one of the classic examples is With or Without You, which is, and I can't remember the lyrics, so I'm just going to kind of hum it, but it's. With or without you. So it's just 1, 5, 6, 4, and it literally just cycles through those same chords the entire time ad nauseum. So it's, and I have a video actually on that, how using one chord progression, stitching together multiple melodies a verse melody, a chorus melody, a bridge melody. Like, it's amazing how they were able to stretch 4 chords into really a beautiful song. And you know, the 1-5-6-4 is so common now, it's a cliche, or it's borderline cliche, but there's so much more you can do by incorporating other chords. But how do you do that? And it's using modal mixture. So let's look at, for example, we were in the key of G. So let's look at, in this example, with or without G, I was playing it in G. So, and I think the song was recorded in the key of D, but that doesn't matter. Let's look at G. So G is 1, so we're in Ionian, and G is 1, so it goes 1, 5 to the D major chord, 6 E minor, 4 C major, 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5, 6, 4, and it just loops within this very safe harmonic zone. It's safe because it just sounds so damn good that you can't go wrong. And a lot of songs stick within something like that, even if it's not that exact progression. You know, you might go into a minor key and play, you know, so now we're looking at G Aeolian or G minor. You know, you might include a 1, you know, a minor 3, flat minor, or flat major 3, a flat major 7, you know, and you might incorporate like a flat major 6. And it's basically the same chords, but starting on a minor 1. So that's cool. And you can do a lot of good stuff with just 4 chords or 5 chords or 6 chords. But what if you included more chords than that? Within each key and mode, there are 7 chords based on how chords are derived from tertian intervals. In other videos, I get into that, and I'll show how those are constructed here. But within a given key and mode, you have basically 7 chords, 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and a diminished chord. You know, whether it's Aeolian or you're in Ionian is a common mode, 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and diminished chord. But the song we are going to look at here includes 11 chords. I think I counted that right. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 chords, by definition, 11 is more than 7. So we're already incorporating chords from at least 2 modes. And as it turns out, the song includes chords from, it moves through 4 different modes, which is kind of crazy. And that's even like on the other extreme, where instead of just staying within 4 chords within a single mode, going to 4 different modes is pretty awesome. So the chords in the song are E major, F sharp minor, A major, B major, C major, A minor, D minor, G major. We've got a B diminished, B minor, and F sharp major. Now, just playing them, and these are listed in chronological order as they appear in order through the song. Obviously, that isn't the chord progression because it's kind of sounds a little messed up. But we're going to look at how this song moves through multiple modes and how the circle of fifths is the map. It's the chord map to move between these modes seamlessly, harmonically pleasing, and in a beautiful way. So the song is Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. So I actually was reading up a little bit on this. This is Billy Joel. Billy Joel's the one on the left. And his wife at the time, or soon after this, was Christy Brinkley. And she's actually in the video. If you've seen the video, it's like, I mean, the song is about Uptown Girl. He's this guy he's a backstreet guy who is aspiring to be with this beautiful woman who is from, you know, the upper echelons of society in New York. And he's just like, whoa, how could I ever land a girl like that? She's the Uptown Girl. And so you're going to see that theme, that lyrical theme, actually show up in the sound of the chord progression. And it's really cool how he did it. So let's look at how he turns these 11 chords into sonic bliss. So to start out, the first chord progression in the intro, the verse, and it's actually repeated in the outro, is it's in the key of E major. So E is a 1, and then it goes to F sharp minor, the minor 2, and then back to 1, and then to A major, the major 4, and then E major, F sharp minor, E major, A, B. So in the key of E, and specifically E Ionian, we're just moving between these 3 major chords, E, A, and B, and then also F sharp minor, or the relative minor of the 4 chord in this mode, which is the minor 2. So we're playing oh, sorry. And then it repeats back into E, and so we're just moving between. So far, it's only 4 chords. So he could have just stuck with those 4 chords. It would have sounded amazing, and he could have made a pop song out of that. It's a very kind of joyous sounding progression. And what's cool about this progression is he's playing that 1. So let's go to the if we're just looking at this mode in isolation, right? So we've got 4 chords. We've got E major, F sharp minor, the minor 2, A major, the major 4, and B major, the major 5. So in essence, he's starting on this root of E. He's going up a whole step to this F sharp minor chord. And then he goes back to the E, but the E major chord includes this major 3rd in that chord, a G sharp minor, or sorry, a G sharp note. He could have played G sharp minor before coming to the A. So it could have sounded like it's moving down in this direction, but because of the way that these notes are laid out. But if you were playing it up the fretboard, E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A, which sounds like he's aspirational and trying to climb the social ladder to be with this uptown girl. So he could have played that minor 3 chord, but it's another minor chord and almost sounds a little too sweet, or a little too not as happy as the song is if he just goes back to the major 1, which again includes that G sharp chord, or the G sharp note. So he could have again played so it's rising up, but he played so there's some movement back and forth that, because he's focusing more on major chords, it sounds more joyous or more energetic. But that's in essence, he's basically playing this rising pattern up through the key of A, or key of E, E major. And then it goes into this interesting chorus. So what goes on there? Because we just switched into a different mode. So we go into C to A minor, the minor 6, D minor, to G, C, A, and then it plays this B diminished chord, A, or say E major. So we went from over here in the circle of fifths. Let's look at it right here. We went from over here in the circle of fifths, where we have E as the 1, the major 1 chord. So E Ionian, where E is 1, and then minor 2, major 4, major 5. And then it shifts over like, whoa, what's going on here? There's like you go through a sonic wormhole into this other mode of C Ionian, where now C is 1. So it's 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, 6, and then this diminished 7. So what is going on here with that? Because that's kind of crazy. So if we look at this, we can mark this up more easily. And we have, so we went from over here, E, to over here to C. And the way that works is because C is basically like the flat major 6 in the key of E. So let's look at this again and see what happened, because that it's easy to say it's like a sonic wormhole, and it's another thing to show what's going on here. So let's go back to the key of E, and using the chord map where we can rotate the layers really does help to get your hands literally on this progression. So in the key of E, as we're playing that verse, Uptown Girl, and then it goes over to this flat major 6. But because the tonic shifts and C becomes the point of resolution in that mode, it's almost like we're playing the key of E minor, or the parallel mode of E Aeolian. So E was major 1 over here in Ionian, and then E minor 1 is the tonic of Aeolian, but it's not quite that. But the reason that C works is because it is related to the parallel minor mode of E, and so landing on that C isn't like totally crazy. There's also this connection, this geometric connection between E and C, in that these 3 notes form a perfect triangle: the major 3rd, the flat major 6, and the 1. So there's this geometric connection where there's this kind of epic relationship between chords. And we talked about this in the chord substitutions video, but E, C, and A flat together, they have almost like an epic sound. And so, and it does, you can kind of hear it. There's this epic shift when you go into the chorus of da, 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 da. But instead of calling it E minor, C becomes the 1. So let's erase this and go to now C. We're going to keep the grouping around C, but we're going to shift the 1 over to C. And because there's a D minor, it's actually C Ionian. So it's kind of like a trick, because C is the flat major 6 of E minor, but we're incorporating some other chords in C Ionian. And so it goes, and when she's walking, she's running, so it's basically, you can kind of hear it, and you can hear it in vocals, the way that the song is produced, that it has almost this like 1950s. I mean, the backing vocals are totally like that, like, I don't want to call it a barbershop sound, but it has a very 1950s sound, which is kind of lends to the sweet theme of, you know, if not innocent love, at least love, between these characters in the song. So we're moving between 1, 6, 2, 5, and then 1, 6, and then diminished 7. And this diminished 7 naturally leads to, it's almost like it's hinting at wanting to go back to the E, and then this E is the 5 of the major 5, the dominant 5 of the next tonic in the next modal mixture shift, which is in the interlude, which is, I'll just play it right now. So I'm going to play the chorus again and then go into the interlude. So it's da, 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 da. Da, 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 goes na, 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 na. So what we did there is yet another shift, another sonic wormhole from C Ionian to, we shifted into A Ionian, and we'll look at how that works. But basically, we played that 5, that E major, which is the 5 of A, which then kind of shifts us into A. And A, it's basically the same progression as the chorus. It's 1, 6, 2, just like we played in the chorus of playing C, A minor, and D minor, or 1, 6, and 2. And that little interlude, it's the same progression, just in a different key, where it's A Ionian, A is 1, and then we play 6, F sharp minor, 2, the minor 2, B minor, and then we play this B chord, which is now the 5 of E, which brings us to E. So it's like we're shifting through parallel modes and through neighboring keys in the circle of fifths. Let me play it one more time. So I'm going to play the chorus of C, A minor to D minor to G major, C to A minor to B diminished to E. So that E is the 5 of A, which then brings us to A to F sharp minor, E minor to B7, which is the major 2 in that key of A, but it's also the dominant 5 of E, which brings us to E Ionian. So we're just kind of shifting between different keys and different modes. Now, when we went from E to C, we said that there was this triangle, or this geometric connection between those two chords. Likewise, there's this geometric connection between C and A, in that they're part of a perfect square of chords, where C, A, F sharp, and E flat form this perfect square. So there's this geometry that's informing the relationships between chords. And then we go back into the verse section again, which is E. Up, down, girl. And then it goes into this cool like bridge section, which is how does that go? It's let's look at what that looks like as an illustration, which is right here. So this bridge is kind of crazy because then it shifts into G now. So now it's G Lydian, which is this grouping right here, where G, the major 1, is the tonic, G major 1 right here. But because it includes an A major 2, and a B minor, it's Lydian. It's not Ionian. So it has this almost kind of ethereal sound, which Lydian has. So it's G major 1 to A major 2 to B minor 2. Oh, sorry, I played that wrong. So G major 1 to A major 2 to F sharp, which is a major 7 chord, and then B minor, A, G to A to F sharp to B7, back to da da da. So what's going on with that? Because G also seems random. Like, where the hell did G come from? Let's look at that in the circle of fifths. So far, we've moved between E Ionian to C Ionian, again, because of that special geometric relationship between these two chords. And it's more than just the geometry. The geometry is really what's going on, but that geometry also informs why, in the key of E, that relationship between E and the flat major 6, which is often played in the parallel mode of Aeolian, but where C has this D minor chord and C is the tonic, we shift it where C is the tonic, but those are the chords we're incorporating. And then we go to this basically a relationship of a 6 from C to A is a 6, which is part of a square, a geometric square. And so we go into A, and then A is just one key away in the circle of fifths, so therefore harmonically related to the key of E. But then G is just like C is related to A as part of a square of chords. G and E are part of its own square of chords. E, D flat, B flat, and G. So there's this geometric relationship between those chords. And so when we shift into G Lydian, we have these chords, which are 1, major 2, and then we have a flat a major 7, which is outside the key. But the reason that works is because this is a secondary dominant to the next chord in the progression, which is the minor 3. So in other videos, we talk about where secondary dominants come from, but in essence, a secondary dominant is just the 5 chord or the perfect fifth of a given chord that isn't the tonic. So G is the tonic in this case, and we're going to move to this minor 3 chord, the B minor, but we wouldn't play F sharp minor because the secondary dominant is the dominant major 5. So instead of playing F sharp minor, we play F sharp major, which is the major 7, and that secondary dominant brings us to B minor or the minor 3. And then when we play the major 3, that major 3 is the secondary dominant to, and also just the dominant to 5, which is the next key when we go back into the verse and eventually the outro. So this B chord shows up as a borrowed chord in the key of A. It shows up as a borrowed chord in the key of G Lydian. And it's always bringing us back to this home base of E, which is ultimately where we land. Back to the key of E, and we it's like this satisfying resolution, come back to E. But in the meantime, we're moving through all these different areas of the circle of fifths, which I'll show you here. So if we look at just the chords within a given mode in isolation, it can be kind of hard to see these connections. Well, really very hard to see the connections. But side by side, these different modes are, you can see how we're in the key of E, Ionian, in the intro, verse, and outro. And then in the chorus, we shift again because of that geometric relationship that's part of a triangle between the first tonic, E, and C. Those are part of a geometric relationship where those chords sound, it's an interesting movement from one to the next. And then from C to A is part of this other geometric pattern where these chords, and actually if you just play the notes, the root notes of that, it's a diminished chord. There's this really special relationship between minor thirds and major sixths, which is in essence what the square is. That brings us to the next section. And then from G to E, getting from G to E is again part of another square of chords. And this circle of fifths is looking at the root notes of each respective chord because it's instrument agnostic, meaning that, the circle of fifths, like all of these relationships apply no matter what instrument you're playing, whether it's a guitar, ukulele, piano, whatever. These are universal relationships as far as music theory goes. But I'm using the examples here on a guitar. So, we could look at the circle of fifths like this. And this diagram is in the library. There's also a poster that I have in the shop that includes these chords, like this version of the circle of fifths, so you can literally play the chords. Now, these are all mostly open positions, meaning that you're playing some open strings. But with this poster, there's also a poster that shows all of the different inversions for all of these chords. So it's like a ton of different chords. And you could play, of course, this song or any song using different chords. But so in the first section, we play an E major and an F sharp minor. That's what I was playing on the guitar. And then it goes to A and B. That's basically the intro and the verse and the outro. And then it goes into the chorus section, which is C and A minor, D minor, and G. It also incorporates a B diminished chord. And then in the interlude section, we've got an A, an F sharp minor, and a B minor. And then in the bridge section, there's a G chord and an A chord, which we've already highlighted. There's also an F sharp major chord. It's labeled as a G flat major chord here, but F sharp and G flat are enharmonic names or synonymous names for the same chord. And then this Lydian also incorporates, there's already a B major, and I think that might be it, actually. Let's see. We have, of the 11 chords that we started with, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So 11 chords, and you can see how they're all kind of like within neighboring touching areas of the circle of fifths, which is why they sound harmonically pleasing, because and we could, through secondary dominance and other jumps, harmonic jumps, incorporate other chords like that, or incorporate other stuff, but it's not a coincidence that these chords are kind of like touching. It's almost like they're moving, shifting, even though the song jumps pretty dramatically between sections. It's not so dramatic that it's jarring. It's just noticeable and keeps the song moving and keeps the song interesting. So in the beginning, we started with what seemed like a random collection of chords, which is E, F sharp minor, A, B, C, A minor, D minor, G, B diminished, B minor, and F sharp. And that's normally how chords are depicted. Like if you go to Ultimate Guitar or some of these sites, they'll just say, okay, here's an inventory. Here's a quick inventory of the chords you're going to play. Let's play. And there's just like, what's even going on? There's not even an attempt to explain why these chords are used, how these chords are related, why they might sound compatible together, and why they might work in a song. And so you can see on his face, like he knows something's going on. Like the fact that he understood, like even within his mind's eye, Billy Joel had a sense of these chord movements, and you can see it in his eyes. There was some knowledge going on with the circle of fifths, and that's why, despite otherwise, the physical disparity between these two, he was able to rise up that social ladder as he does in the song Uptown Girl and land someone like Christy Brinkley. So it's music theory, and it's the circle of fifths that was his friend in the process of guiding him through that journey of ascent. And of course, you can play these chords on any instrument, and play around with the modal mixture, with playing around with the different layers. And then in a version like this, you can literally, it's easier, it's a more direct. So instead of just focusing on the root notes, you can play the different chords with the actual fingering, as these diagrams show. It's a really good song, and I know he plays it on keyboard. He's the piano man, Billy Joel, and so it might not be the first go-to in your mind, even as a guitarist, to even think of Billy Joel. But he actually has some amazing chord progressions, and I think it's a great example of how the circle of fifths is used to guide the process. And I don't know that he was sitting with the circle of fifths specifically in his mind and referring to it, but in a way I think he kind of was, in that knowing how the different modes are related. It's one thing to like see how the chords are laid out, and how the chords are built within a given mode, and their relationship within a respective mode. But then it's another thing to be able to look at how all of these chords are laid out and interact between parallel modes and different keys in the circle of fifths. And we looked at this a little bit in other videos, but just to recap on that, when I say parallel modes, if we focus on the key of E, for example, where E is 1, key of E meaning E Ionian, if we shift over here, so now this grouping is pointing at Lydian, it is with E as 1, it's the E Lydian, the E Lydian mode. And it's really just the key of B Ionian, the grouping of chords in B Ionian, but when we make E the 1, it has this different, more ethereal sound because E is treated as the 1 chord. Or, if we rotate this grouping where again, E is still 1, but this grouping highlights E Ionian, which is just a fancy name for the key of E major. And then if we come over here, we're still keeping the layer of numerals highlighting E as 1. If we focus on this grouping of chords, these 7 chords, it's E Mixolydian, which is really just a permutation of A major, because these are the same 7 chords in A major, also known as A Ionian. If we rotate over here, now we're getting into now we've left E major out of the group, but we have E minor as the minor 1. And this is a permutation of the D major, or key of D Ionian. This is E Dorian, which is a really cool mode. And then now we're E minor 1 is the tonic here. We have E Aeolian, and E minor is the relative minor of G major. This is the G major or G Ionian mode, also known as the E Aeolian mode if E is 1. And then we have E Phrygian, where E minor is the minor 1 over here, but with this grouping as a permutation of C major, it's E Phrygian. And then we have E Locrian, where E diminished, or the 1 diminished chord, is over here. And this one, the Locrian mode, is very rarely used, like unless you're Bjork or someone like that. Actually, Muse has, I have a video on Phrygian chord progressions, so it's actually worth checking out. Phrygian dominant is a really cool sequence of chords that makes for really good music, but it's almost like so dark, the Phrygian mode, that it's not as common. And it's also very dissonant because a diminished 1 is not really a great home bass. I shouldn't judge it so much. I don't mean to say it's not a great home bass. It's just not as, for sure, not as consonant or as pleasing to most ears based on our training through listening to music on the radio or Spotify, where most songs aren't in Locrian. And so when we hear Locrian, it's almost kind of jarring how dark and kind of intense it sounds. But that's Locrian. So if we move all the way up here back to Ionian, Ionian is for sure the most common mode in a lot of songs, partly because it just sounds so happy. You've got this pattern that's based on the A major, or the major scale, in this case E major, that just sounds so good. And so Ionian is really popular. And in this song of Modal Mixture, it is the mode of choice, even when we're shifting from E Ionian to C Ionian in the chorus, and then we go to C or A Ionian in the interlude there. In the bridge, we do shift into G Lydian, but Lydian is really close to Ionian. These two modes are neighbors in terms of the how bright or dark they are. Ionian is very bright, or for lack of a better word, happy sounding. Lydian is almost ethereal. It's almost like off the charts bright. And so most of the modes in Uptown Girl are Ionian, and you do meaning Billy Joel slips in G Lydian. If he had gone to like from Ionian to shifting into Phrygian, it would have sounded like a little too different probably, because those chords aren't so close in the circle of fifths, and therefore would be a really jarring jump. So modal mixture is awesome, and it was definitely more of a thing back in the day. You had like composers like Irving Berlin, who wrote, White Christmas and Putting on the Ritz, and songs from like, I don't know if he was in the 20s, but for sure in the 30s and 40s. He was a composer who incorporated more modes, modal mixture, and other songwriters did it. The Beatles did it. Beach Boys include modal mixture. Billy Joel, of course, incorporates modal mixture, and you get it in a lot of songs by songwriters who just have experimented more or have learned more just through whatever process. It's usually being self-taught, a lot of the popular artists. And it's amazing that they've mapped these things in their mind's eye, to be able to see it with your own two eyes, that there's definitely a logic to all of this. And all of these relationships are based on geometric connections. To actually be able to see it, it's like you don't have to be Billy Joel you don't have to be this like, whoa, where did you come from, man? Songwriters, like, we all can leverage the power of modal mixture. And as good as a 4-chord progression sounds, it is more interesting and more exciting to incorporate other chords. And that's done through borrowed chords or full-on modal mixture like this song does. All right, I'm going to jump into the comments here and just speak to some of these. So I'm just kind of skimming through. So cool to see everyone on. This is awesome. And got some folks in all sorts of places. This is really cool. I'm just scanning. Thank you, Jason, for being on Guyana, South America. That's awesome. And okay, let's see. That's so cool. Let's see. Okay, Eddie. And you know what? This was already answered. So you have a circle of fifths with the modes. I have to get one of those. Yes. And the link that was included here is to that. So definitely check that out. And let me go to figure out what I'm doing here. Get my tech. Jack, it's good to see you on. And Dwight, first time here. So happy you're here. Rod from Ottawa, right on. Thank you for being here. And Jack in Winter Haven, Florida. Awesome. And Josh, the minutes you missed will be part of the replay, but you only were like 2 minutes or 3 minutes off. Geneva, Switzerland, Thomas Bosan, right on. Thank you for being here. And let's see, Daryl, you're in Texas. And this beautiful thing about music is it's this universal language where it's like the fact that we can all connect on these patterns that are universal is beautiful. Alapico, aloha, very cool to see you on. Iggy from Ottumwa, if I'm saying that right. And let's see, Jason from Guyana, South America, awesome. And Ottumwa, Iowa, Radar's hometown, right on. And Farmington, Iowa, Dave, cool to see you on. Let's see, we've got, let's see. Hey, Jack, thanks for your feedback on the chord map. I'm glad that you love it. The chord map is to be able to like hold music theory in your hands. is kind of surreal to be able to like make what is this otherwise intangible, ethereal, abstract thing, sound waves that are floating through the air, to be able to hold it is truly a lot of fun. Okay, so Josh, being a beginner at this is awesome, and honestly, like you're jumping ahead of years of pain and frustration by jumping into music theory in a visible way. Music theory is, by definition, to see sound. Theory is Greek for theoria, or it comes from the Greek theoria, which means to look at, view, or see. And it seems like a contradiction in terms, because music is sound and sound is invisible. So how do you see sound? Because music theory means to see sound, and it's using the natural patterns of color to see the otherwise invisible patterns of music, color music. So to be able to see it and bypass all of the pain and frustration that I know I experienced personally over the years, it was a long process, a long, hard slog to get to seeing sound and getting past the hurdle of, wow, this is really frustrating. This is really difficult to be able to see it. Anyway, all that to say, I'm so excited you're here. Okay, so Thomas, you said, I can't wait to constantly turn down supermodels once I master the circle. Man, it's a problem that you're going to have to deal with. But if Billy Joel can do it, he kind of shows you the way as far as how that goes. Yeah, the circle of fifths truly is, it's like a secret weapon in the arsenal of songwriting. The first time I was introduced to the circle of fifths, it was a diagram of key signatures. So as abstract as can be. In the full theory course, in lesson 10, I talk about how, why the typical depiction of the circle of fifths as key signatures is so frustrating, because it's like so close yet so far away. It's like showing the key to the musical universe, but through this warped lens where it's like, oh, it's easy to dismiss because you're like, oh, that's confusing. That doesn't make sense. And so it's like you're so close and yet so far away when you're looking at the typical depiction of the circle of fifths. When you're looking at what it actually is and how it actually informs chord progressions, it's like, whoa, it's a lot of fun. It's amazing. Okay, so I want to speak to this. Yeah, so you can see, Joshua, you said, I can see if you go to Dorian, there's an E chord. Yes. So going to E, just to recap this, because I think it's important. If we're in E major or E Ionian, all of these come from, and I have videos on this, but it's basically all of these crazy sounding names come from different regions of ancient Greece. And so that's where the mode names came from. So Mixolydian, like when do you ever hear that in normal speech now? You don't. But it's just, it's a term that refers to ancient Greece. So yeah, if you shift over here into Dorian, there is an E minor chord. And so Ionian, and I'll do another video focusing specifically on this, but these three modes, Lydian, Ionian, and Mixolydian, if we're looking at E as the one, the thing that those three modes share in common is their tonic, or one chord, is a major chord. And then we come into the minor modes when we shift into Dorian, E minor, minor one, Aeolian, E minor, minor one, and Phrygian, E minor, minor one. These are the three minor modes. So we have three major modes, three minor modes, and then we have the Locrian, which is like the runt of all the different modes. And it definitely has a different vibe. It's like more minor than minor in terms of how it sounds, how like brooding it sounds. It's you run a risk of confusing things by trying to describe modes in words, because it is a subjective, defies description type thing, music in general. I mean, it's like communication without words. So trying to put words to it to describe their qualities, the different modes, can be maybe misleading, but or pigeonholing. But it is true that those three modes are major modes. Those 3 modes are minor modes because they have a minor one, and then those are Locrian. And we're just focusing on E, but because music is cyclical and symmetrical, we could shift to any of the keys, and it's the same idea. It's the same layout. It's beautiful, actually, how it works. Yes, so Locrian is creepy sounding, Jack. I agree, and creepy is a good word for it. There are some really cool songs. Actually, I've heard a really cool song that my son composed in Locrian that sounded really good. I was like, whoa, is this Locrian? And he was like, yeah. And it was surprising how good it sounded. So let's look at some of these comments here. Okay, so Joshua, you said, and I'm getting caught up on the comments, so pardon the delay in my responses here. So what is the half of the circle that used that isn't labeled? Okay, so like sometimes I'll refer to this as no man's land, which it's not really no man's land, in that like it's not no man's land, in that you can pull chords from here. So for example, if you wanted to play a 1 and then a minor 3, so A to a C sharp minor in the key of A, Ionian, but to make it over to the minor 3, you wanted to play the dominant 5 of C sharp minor, you would play the major 7 or G sharp major, which is coming from this area without labels. It's the secondary dominant of that chord. So that's one example of pulling chords not from the parallel modes from over here, but a secondary dominant from over here. And so those are, that's fair game. That area is not no man's land. You can incorporate chords from over there and they sound really good. So I'll talk more about that in some more videos. So let's see. Iggy, I think the other half is Blankian. So rather than no man's land, we can just label this as Blankian. And it does sound like it's ancient Greece, from ancient Greece. I like that. That's a good name. And so let's see. And that really is a good question on what's up with that area that doesn't have the labels. Yeah, so this is an example of using Modal Mixture to create magic, and by way of Billy Joel with Uptown Girl. There are all sorts of songs that incorporate Modal Mixture, maybe to a lesser degree and sometimes to a greater degree, where there's even more modes and more shifting going on. But it's pretty amazing that within this short span of a single pop song that Billy Joel moves us through this many modes and this many keys, and it sounds good. It's pretty cool. It's pretty ambitious, actually. A lot of Modal Mixture doesn't necessarily have to run such a gamut. Like in the case of Kodachrome, Paul Simon, it was a couple of different modes that were incorporated, not 4. So kudos to Billy Joel for upping his game with this song. It's a really good one. I'm going to have the diagrams for this in the library. So I'll be posting that there so you can take this in at your own pace and play through the chords. Like I say, this poster, the poster that goes with this, is all mostly open chords, or cowboy chords as I call in other videos, which are, easier to strum. But to expand your palette and play further up the fretboard, you can start incorporating bar chords and different inversions of all of these chords. This is 36 chords here, but with 5 different inversions, it expands your movement along the fretboard. So you can check that out if you want. And I'll be talking more to some of these questions, which are awesome, in some upcoming videos. But this was in essence what I want to cover today. Modal Mixture, kind of getting outside the modern paradigm of 4 chords and taking it to the next level with borrowed chords, Modal Mixture, and really using the circle of fifths to its full extent. So thank you so much for being on, and I love the comments. as always, I love seeing where everyone's coming from and geeking out with you about music theory. So thank you for joining, and we'll be talking very soon in the next one. I'll see you.